Welcome to Shareholders of a Better World, brought to you by TBLI Group. At TBLI Group, we have an established reputation as an organization dedicated to building the ecosystem of global sustainability and impact investing. We're doing this through educating, advising, and facilitating transactions in global sustainability and impact business, as well as capital solutions for private companies, family offices, and fund groups. For nearly 25 years, TBLI Group has created a vertically integrated ecosystem of education to action through TBLI conferences and TBLI consulting. More about our company can be found at tbligroup.com. This webinar is brought to you by TBLI Foundation, which hosts educational learning experiences dedicated to a better planet. Through the foundation, we build sustainable communities by sharing the people and the experiences making a difference to so many of our lives around the world. Our weekly podcasts bring impact thought leaders that are doing and not only chatting. Now let me introduce my guest today.
Greetings from our studio in Amsterdam. I'm extremely honored to have Eva-Lotta Sjostedt. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Before I introduce her, just some housekeeping information. For those of you that have never joined one of our events, if you need to pose a question, do it in the lower right-hand corner or post a comment. If you want to send a private message to any of those people in the room, just move your mouse over the person's name. A screen will pop up and you can send them a private message. So we're going to be dealing with a very, very challenging topic, trust, which seems in very short supply around. But we're very lucky. We have an uber expert on trust that actually is getting lots of people who want her help to regaining trust. So for those of you that live on another planet and never heard of Eva-Lotta Sjostedt, why don't you introduce yourself? I'll go on mute and just listen to who you are, what you're doing, and also how can this audience help you?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here and talk to all of you and hopefully have discussions with you, profound discussion, even though if it's online, because it's a very, very important subject that we are going to discuss. So by starting to introduce myself and my story, what I've done so far with my life. Today I live in Copenhagen. I come from Sweden. I grew up as a little girl, being a very wild little girl, climbed the highest trees, and I was running really fast, and I liked to play with the boys. When I started school, I realized that was not the right way to be in school, so I had to restrict myself, become more conformative, and to fit in. So a lot of my natural capabilities and my both my intuition, I would say, and also my creativity was kind of boxed in into the normal educational system. However, after going through school, I decided to start to become a designer because I realized that when it was fashion design, just to clarify, when I got close to people, because clothes and the appearance is a way to actually express what you want people to think about you. Why you're dressed a certain way is actually sending out a lot of signals. So I thought this is a good way to actually get closer to people's minds and hearts by actually being in the fashion industry. So I went to art school in Stockholm and started my education. And then I was lucky enough to get introduced to a man in Hong Kong. His name is Edward Pang. So I became a fashion designer in his big company that was based on Nathan Road in Hong Kong. And then I was living in Sweden. I had at that time a child. I got married to my husband when I was 19, and I'm today 55. So we've been together for a while. But in those days when I was a fashion designer and I worked for Edward Pang, I was very much into the shapes and the colors of the fabrics and so on. But eventually, after a couple of years, I started to become much more interested into how is the business going and why are people buying or why are they not buying the designs I made. So I left the company after a couple of years. I went back to school. I started to study again because I realized that I was having a lot of lack of competence when it came to financial, legal, and those things. So only half of my brain was kind of working with the creative part of colors and textures and so. So I went in and I applied to a business school, and I went there for 3 years, and I studied all the subjects I was running away from before my whole life, which was finance, law, and those things. So it was very, very challenging. However, I think when you challenge yourself to get into something that is very unknown and quite scary, you also grow as a person. And you are, okay even if you fail once in a while. So I did that, and then I went and I got a job at Ikea. And I guess most of you listening might know that company or knows about that company. I had a really funny and a great interview I like to share with you, because the way they recruited me was, you come from this background with fashion, you have this kind of capability, so marketing would be a natural choice. But they said, we think you have a high potential when it comes to leadership. We can see the way you can have a capability to interact with people, because we need great leadership in this company. So we're going to put you in a job you have absolutely no competence in. So I became logistic manager at Ikea. I can tell you my husband was laughing quite a lot when I told him that I got that offer. And how did I then manage to do that? Obviously because I have a leadership that embraces people, and I'm able to listen to people, and I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing also to invite people to grow. I think those were the things that really made this journey, which was really hard at the same time, of course, because I had to study quite hard to learn the logistic principles. Because if you order a little bit too much in that company, as you know, Ikea is a volume company, it can be quite a lot of sofas at the loading docks, and we don't want that. So I studied really hard, and I had great people around me, and they were growing, and I was growing. And after a while, I was promoted to become a store manager for the first store in Ikea, which is in Älmhult. The purpose of that was for me to be introduced to the founder, Ingvar Kamprad, because he lives nearby in the forest, so he has a house there. So I met Ingvar very often in the store. We walked the store and we got to know each other. And Ingvar was constantly yelling at me, because being a manager at Ikea is not a good thing. You should do the hard work, he says. Management is just like, nothing to really be proud of. And he did that obviously to challenge management, keep us down to be close to the customers and understand where it really happens. So I had a really interesting time with Ingvar in Älmhult, and then I got a call one day from another guy. His name is Lasse, and he came up to my office in the store in Älmhult, and he said, "We have now got a yes to establish Ikea in Japan. Do you want to join me to start it up?" They thought I had this nice background because I worked in Asia before as a designer, and they believed in me and my potential to lead people and to be capable to take this journey on. So I went home to my husband and my, at that time, 3 children. I said, "You want to move to Japan?" And we had a discussion around the kitchen table, and then we moved to Japan, and we stayed there for 4 years. The adventure in Japan was one of the most challenging and the most rewarding things I've done in my life, because the culture is so completely different, coming from Scandinavia and living in Europe, and then becoming still, even though we are in 2021 now, being a female C-suite is still something people talk about. And this was a couple of years ago. So it wasn't very common that it was a female managing director, because it was me and Lasse running the show for Ikea in Japan then to start it up. So when we entered the meeting rooms, they always asked me if I can bring some tea. And of course I did. I found the kitchen and I brought some tea, and then I gave them my business card, and we could start to work together. And I think a little bit of that secret is to be quite open for, why did they ask me to bring the tea? Not that they look down at me just because the culture is so different. So there were so many unknowns for them. And then when they found out that I was the one in charge, of course, when the embarrassment kind of disappeared, we kind of worked on a different level where we had much better trust and openness to each other. Because I really showed by getting the tea that I really tried to understand where they came from, just as one example. I think when I meet people, they really want to hear a lot about Japan. So I think I'm going to stay here for a while in my story and tell a little bit more about the 4 years and some of the key things that happened there. One thing was that we opened, during my time, we opened 4 Ikea stores, and all of them were 40,000 square meters, so quite large, with 9 loading docks, so big scale, 24-hour operation. And we hired thousands of people actually from zero. And we opened also a distribution center in Nagoya, which was fully robotized and with robots and a lot of, we worked together with Toyota because we had a guy in our board and he was very high up in Toyota. So we went to the Toyota city and learned just in time and how to make Ikea more optimized. So that went really well. So during those things, by starting to build those stores and hiring all these people and getting the supply chain to really be in place, which is a challenge in Japan, and being an island and all, we can say that you have to actually really understand where the customers, where the Japanese people, where their interest lays, where is the interest for them to come to Ikea? Why should they come to us? So every single moment, every single day, I had to balance the questions between, is it Ikea in Japan or is Japan in Ikea? And it's a very interesting question to debate upon. And sometimes when you tip the wrong way, you can see how the whole chain becomes really unclear for most people. So one thing we did, we needed to understand, because we obviously at Ikea, we sell furniture, we sell stuff for people's home. So we need to understand, how do people live? What's interesting? Where do they sleep? How do they eat? What space do they have or don't have? Because as you know, Japan is a very dense society. Space is very limited. So space is very expensive. So we decided to go to people's homes, and I knocked doors actually, and I got invited to many people's homes, Japanese homes, and sitting down around the kitchen table talking to some of the housewives, because a lot of the women still stay at home and stop their career and their education when they have children. I opened the kitchen cabinets and asked, how do you set the table? Where do you sleep? And so forth. And all that, of course, we streamlined and we processed into a very commercial offer that worked. And one example on that could be, since the 1970s, Ikea had a storage system called Antonios, which is a storage system where it's a modular system and you put your stuff in it in the closets. So when we found out, and when I found out as well, that people in Japan, they sleep very often on in tatami rooms, and they have a big cabinet called ushire. This ushire cabinet is very empty. Still, they lack a lot of space. So we said, why don't we put the Antonio solution into the ushire cabinet and let them sleep on the tatami instead of forcing them to buy the bed the first thing. And you can imagine the sales forecast on the Antonio went really well, and also found a very good leverage of meeting the local needs with the actual offer Ikea had. Another story from Japan is that when you go into a very unknown territory, the second store we opened was in Kohoko in Yokohama, and I decided to go in and work as a store manager there to go get close to the operations for a year and a half. And then I was approached by Yakuza, and I'm sure you know what the Yakuza is, and realizing very naively so that they, of course, wanted us to do things we didn't want to do. So we ended up one evening on the parking lot having negotiations with them, 4:00 in the morning. And after a while discussing with them back and forth with my security manager, who is Japanese and knows how to do these things more than I did, because I certainly didn't know how to do this, I said, why don't we try a different approach? Because around the store, many of the Yakuza members actually lived. So I said, the housewives are home and we have a big restaurant and people loved actually the Ikea meatballs and they also liked the cinnamon buns. Said, why don't you go around? Yogo-san and I, we walked around to all the housewives, knocked doors with cinnamon buns, got invited and said, we're very happy to be in your neighborhood and we would be very happy if we could be here and be here in peace and become good neighbors. And guess what? Then the Yakuza stopped contacting us after a while. So the learnings there is to kind of, you need, when you go to an adventure like that, you need to be very firm and constantly challenging and be close to yourself and understand, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What is my true nature? And not lose yourself to become too much into the local society, but still carry the brand of Ikea and so forth. I think I'm going to leave Japan now because I can talk about this for a long time. And after Japan, I went to the place where you are right now, in Amsterdam. So I lived there for a couple of years. I love the city. It's an amazing city. Lived in the city center on Keizersgracht. I hope I pronounce it right. Okay. And then I went in to do the Ikea. I was the CEO of Ikea in the Netherlands then. I did a lot of rebuildings of old stores. It was 2008-09, and I guess we all remember those years, financial crisis, and coming into a very mature organization that have done a lot of things right. And I made a big mistake. I wanted to close the fire of figures that went down. So I didn't listen to the past because I thought I knew what the future should look like. So I had a lot of work to do to regain the trust of all the hard work they've done before, but also get people moving, right? And not get stuck in the past. So that was one of the bigger leadership challenges I had when I worked there for a couple of years. My last assignment with Ikea was that I was responsible for the whole, what we call digitalization, where we call it multi-channel, omni-channel. Ikea decided after many, many years to open up to more channels, sales channels, which of course challenging the whole business, the whole business idea of Ikea, that you do your part, we do our part, and together we save money. All of a sudden, people could sit at home and click, and we should deliver everything for the same cost as before. I got the job to be in charge of that strategy globally, and I got great people around me because we looked at the 3 worst things that could happen, and we tackled those 3 things. That was the biggest fears in the organization, sitting with Inka Holen, which is the highest organ in Ikea. So the whole supply chain, from the forest to the customer service, into the production line and the financial remuneration systems and everything. And then we got a yes for the strategy and €1 billion to start. That was my last assignment, because after a while I realized if I continue this, I'm going to stay with Ikea forever. And I've been with Ikea then for 10 years, and I was trying a new adventure, a very risky one, which I was aware of. So I went to Germany. I became the CEO of Sjöstedt, which is a very big department store in Germany. At that time, it was owned by a guy called Nicholas Berggruen, and it has a very low trust history in the company, you can say, due to management that hasn't been, doing what people expected them to do. So that was a very short adventure, because later on, during my first year, it was sold further on to a Swiss guy, an Austrian guy, René Benko. So he owns it today, and he has also bought Galeria Kaufhof. So the ones who are familiar with Germany knows that this is now the biggest department store group in Germany. After that, I decided to go to a company, again, back to my roots with design. So I went to a Danish company with global reach, George Jensen. I have a little bit of a piece behind me here, which is their designs, very organic Scandinavian design, luxury jewelry, high priced, and as well as home product. During that time, it was owned from a private equity firm. I stayed there for 3 years and opened up again for the digital journey, putting George Jensen on online capabilities, closed down a lot of stores that didn't work. In Macau, for example, we had a bit of a struggle to make that work, and also repositioned away. Instead of just saying luxury jewelry, we talked about being masters in Scandinavian design language, which opened up for new collaboration possibilities. For example, with Philips in the Netherlands, where we started to do lighting. And then during that time, I entered the board of Metro, which is a wholesaler for hospitality and food, a global reach as well. And I've been on that board now for 4 years. It's been extremely interesting and very challenging, and I love to be there. It's super exciting. And then I'm also on the board for a tech company, an old telecom company in Finland, in Helsinki, called Elisa. Both of them are listed, where we now step into really interesting new collaborations with smart factories and so forth. And then I sit on a board in London, which is an investment board for real estate in logistics. We buy big assets all over Europe, where we have tenants like Amazon's, Mango, and the like. That's what I do. But then what I do mostly these days, what I really love to do, is that I've decided, you come to a certain stage in your life where you decide to, I've done a lot of things. I moved around and done a lot of industries, and I always realized that my true purpose, my best capability, my best ability is to inspire and connect people. And I love to do it in a business context. And then you need the right leadership. And so for 3 years ago, I founded my own company called KUNO Leadership Community. And KUNO is after my grandfather, because he's still in my heart and soul, but he passed away when I was quite young. But he influenced me a lot from my childhood. And KUNO Leadership Community is an ambition and a vision is to connect and inspire current leaders, so we all can act with building trust for future generations. And that's also one of the reasons I really am happy to be here today, because that's nothing you can do alone. I need help. I need help from people. I need everyone who wants to be on this journey to help out, to build trust. And how do you build trust in these days? And I think I have some answers to that. And still the journey will never end, because this is something I've decided to do until the day I die, so to say. So it's a big commitment. So KUNO Leadership Community started out by me discussing a lot with other, what we call C-suite people around the globe through my network. I was asked to come and discuss. We have very profound, really, really amazing discussions about life, you can say, and also how that impacts you going from, ambitions when you're quite young. You want to do so many things. And then if you're lucky, you kind of get close to your purpose. I'm on the stage in my life where I want to leave a legacy. So the legacy I want to leave is that I have hopefully connected and inspired more people to build trust through leadership in business. So it's a profit organization, and I made it a profitable organization or a business instead of an NGO on purpose, because I think it's very important to prove that you actually can earn money and reinvest in trust. Because of course there is a profit cap, so we are reinvesting almost everything back to the movement to get the impact of the movement of trust. So this I did for 2 years. I traveled the globe when we could travel before the pandemic, and I met up with amazing people and had really profound discussions. And then as well started to write together with my partner Eva-Lotta, started to write my book, which is now to be released in May, end of May. It's called The Movement of Trust. What else should it be? And there's where I share the KUNO Leadership Community, the philosophy, and I share my stories, and I share a little bit other things, how we can gain momentum in this and build something together. I think I've spoken a lot right now for 25 minutes, so I think I would love to hand over and maybe have some questions or comments from you guys.
Perfect. I had a question, actually. When you were talking about the Yakuza in the parking lot, it seemed like almost something out of a TV show from Lillehammer, where the mafia came to negotiate with the honest Norwegians. So here is this honest Swedish person dealing with the Yakuza full of tattoos, and they don't understand. What do you mean our wives coming to having meatballs? It's almost comical. I don't know if that was your intention, but I keep thinking of Lillehammer and that. So I see that basically you've always stayed true to yourself, not trying to understand the culture, but not particularly becoming that, and that you stuck true to your values, which seem to have worked because your career has been, just a rocket going up in a relatively short time, and seems without too much effort. But maybe you're leaving out difficult parts. So I had a specific question about trust. So there was a hearing in the United States about the financial crisis, and during that hearing, Senator Levin invited Goldman Sachs traders, and he said to them, in all of your emails, you kept saying that this was a shitty deal. This was garbage trades that you were doing. So what you were doing, you were creating these CDOs, these collateralized debt obligation, and you were making sure that they would collapse, lose money, but you would insure it. So basically, you were selling a car with no brakes and ensuring that there would be an accident. And the reaction of the traders was, well, we didn't do anything wrong. We're market makers. How do you get to have any discussion about trust with someone who has that type of mindset?
Well, I think because I have had quite a lot of discussions with people with that type of mindset, I think it's when you lose yourself completely, in a way that you lost who you truly are and what you want to be known for. Because you can't separate, you can say, so it goes quite deeply. It's not a 5 minutes fix. It's nothing you just go in but you need to understand that you cannot be one person professionally and one privately. Because if you start to believe that that's possible, that you can have a certain value set and a certain ethics and morale when you work, and then probably when you go home and have possibly children or a partner in any way, or want to build profound relationships with anyone, you can't separate those personas. And a lot of people do. And you can see examples of when you do that. But when you start to identify yourself with the task or the work you do, and then if shit hits the fan, right, and you lose your job or something, you lose yourself. And we see that over and over with people that have profoundly ambitions, being very ambitious to go into this task and want to deliver, not really considering who they became delivering that, lost themselves on the way, because I profoundly don't think that people are born in a bad way, if I use that expression. But I think you can lose yourself in an environment where you never talk about and you never recognize for who you are. And you never really talk about values or purpose, but you talk about what you can accomplish and what you can get. And I would say I see a big difference, actually, when I talk to people, because I love to go out and not just, now I'm talking a lot, but also listening a lot. When I hear the younger generation, like, the 20-year-old and up to the, 30 today, there is a shift. There is a definite shift of what is okay and not in the business community. And I think that gives me hope that this will gradually change a bit. And then you can say, I could have decided to stay away from those people. But I think that's actually, when I'm asked to join those discussions with those people that are the way you described, that's actually when we gain the most. But also there has been times when people don't want to hear the music, they don't want to listen to one tone, then there's no idea, or there is no use for me to keep playing or singing. And then of course I have left at times as well.
So I agree with TBLI also prefers to work with irresponsible investors and criminals, mainly because they have a better sense of humor, they have more money, and they're very predictable. So I understand working with people that are coming from a place that trust was not specifically ingrained or pushed within the organization. And I do agree with you that the younger people find trust very important. The problem is that it's either Bernie, who ran for president, or nothing. So we don't trust any of the others. There's nothing out there. It's only this. It's very black and white with many millennials, which is there are very few angels, many heroes, but very few angels. And but we just went through an incredible lack of trust of the Dutch government. No one wants to work with the prime minister. They don't trust him. So how do this is a cultural change. Just chatting with someone who all the time was hiding because they don't want to really expose everything because there's warts on that and they don't want people to know about the warts. How do you get people to open up, to actually realize that, hey, the strategy you've chosen is a dead end?
Well, I think firstly I have some practical experience of being in the business environment, and I think that's very helpful to get people to open up, because I know their daily life, I know the reality of business. Because sometimes when you talk about these questions, you end up with an HR department, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but I say that I think sometimes you need to really have a profound understanding how it is to be under that kind of pressure and under that kind of performance requirements that it takes to be in the business environments many people are. But that shouldn't and can't exclude that you do it with the right purpose and the right meaning to actually gain trust. And I think by going in from that angle, I have a bigger door opener to get close to people. But I leave that angle very soon, after we have gotten into common ground, understanding, where the business, what requirements is pressuring, how do I get it to work out in the end. You can very quickly go further into, okay, where are you? Because that's where the really interesting dialogues happen, when you start to talk to the person and you see the person and you're actively listening to the person, and then you can help them to see things they might not have seen before. You muted.
Let's say there's a client that is interested in working with KUNO, but they're not interested in trust because trust is what they should be doing. They see it as a semi-greenwashing story. Well, we've got to sell stuff, so let's do this. If it's not wholehearted, when do you stop working with them?
Well, I go in and I try to really give everyone the benefit of a doubt, right? So, but if there is truly no sincere interest to discover, first of all, their purpose, and then, of course, further on also to implement what you call greenwashing, to implement for example, the sustainability strategy into the business context, where it actually is impacting the bottom line and the remuneration system for the management, for example. If that's not really profoundly there, or if there is no intent to get it there, then I'm leaving the room. Then it's not for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is when the mainly large companies call you, say, okay, come in, we need some help. How long is this process of working with them in trying to get through the managers or the CEOs, or maybe it's not that hard, and now it's a question of execution. What length of time are we talking about that you need to engage with the board of directors to get them on a different path?
I always come in with hoping for a lifelong relationship, because that puts a different mindset to it, right? And some I worked with for a long time, but of course, to be practical about it, whatever issue it might be, that goes back to in this discussion, trust, and depending on the issues we discuss, it can take actually can only take a weekend sometimes to break through when you spend the right amount of time with the right people in the room. Because it's not what I say, it's what they discover themselves. And then they need someone who can guide them and hold their hand with the method we have now developed, for example, when it comes to their own characteristics, for example. And again, always tying it back to the business context. So it's not separated. That also shortens the time, because many people who goes into what you would call maybe a traditional leadership training, it should end up with something that, oh, now I'm that kind of leader. That's not the case what I'm doing. I think everyone is on their own personal leadership journey. So what it ends up with is your journey, which is completely private and personal, but based on your characters. And then again, we link it back to the business you're in. So, and I think many times you don't really take the business people are in and can resonate with that. So it becomes something else that I can't really grasp. After that week away, or the course, or whatever you want to call it, they don't know how to put it into practice. It was amazing maybe for the week or the weekend, or if they've gone through a longer program, but how do I really make this into my everyday life with what I actually do? That I think shortens the time when I work with people, because I put it together from the beginning. Yeah.
But I would think that most of the clients that come to you have a crisis or in the middle of a crisis. I would be surprised if you get clients that, oh, all is fine, it's going really well. Doesn't take a crisis to get them, hey, get the bat phone and get Eva here.
I would also say there is a lot of innovation calls. They want to innovate for the future, and that doesn't go back to the product line, but it goes back to how do we recruit people? How do we get the right people? How do we build our talent pool, and what kind of culture and leadership would we need? So it goes back to that as well. So it's not always, now it's the fire, it's a crisis, but it's also how do we build the future?
And is there a cultural difference between, I would imagine your close proximity is the Nordics rather than, let's say, Southern Europe or Asia or South America. So do you find a cultural difference dealing with the Nordics rather than Italians or French or Dutch or Americans?
I think by moving around as much as I have, and as I said, the biggest challenge was Japan when it comes to cultural differences. I think that right now, for example, I work very little with the Nordics. Most of my clients are in other parts of the world. So I wouldn't say the cultural aspect is something I embrace, because I think, again, I think it's very important to understand and believe that we're all connected in this global world. Mm-hmm. And then to see the culture as something on the surface that is important, but we're all human beings in the end of the day, and what do we want? And the sooner you can get to that, and it's different ways to get there because of the cultures are different, but when you get there, then you're there, and then you never go back. Then you're there, and you can have those profound discussions.
Yeah, I agree with you with respect to Japan. It's a very different way of thinking. I remember when engagement was very popular in Europe, people would hire advisors to engage with companies. And when they did it with the Japanese companies never responded. The reason they never responded is because they thought they were being blackmailed by the Yakuza. So they looked at it as, oh, this is blackmail. This is not, engaging with us to find out. So it's a very different. I'm going to take a few of the questions now that have popped up. Let me increase the screen size because my eyes are terrible. Marcel wanted to know, how big is the chance that people lose themselves in a rotten system that plays the wrong game, has the wrong incentives integrated?
If you think that, if the question comes from that's your workplace and hopefully not your home base, of course you can re-gear at home, and hopefully you can kind of balance it out that way. But I do think if you find yourself in an environment where you describe it that way, if you don't have the influence and power to really change it, to have that, I would say it's a very high likelihood that you lose yourself in that, because the environment you surround yourself does impact us. And I think many people are not even realizing that they are in that environment, but they don't feel good. It's something that stresses them and they don't feel good, and they don't know why, because on the surface they can look extremely successful, gained a lot of power, influence, and capital in certain ways, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're in the right place, that's fine. But if you do it on course on yourself, that you lose yourself on the way, well, then it's not that good, is it?
No. Aaron wanted to know, how do you maintain a sense of authenticity while you're promoting your personal brand and corporate interests?
I think that my practical method has always been to spend quite a lot of time on reflection. So I meditated since I was 16. I meditated with TM, Transcendental Meditation, and that helps me to focus and go within my inner self and listen to myself. So I've learned to listen to myself since I was quite young. And I actually find that most people do know when something is wrong. And then, of course, it's easy to close your eyes for it, because it's nicer to be in denial than confusion. And the good thing, though, after confusion, you normally get into inspiration, and just getting there, that can be hard.
Thomas wanted to know, it's great with C-suite people taking responsibility, like Bill Gates. Anyway, how can we give the man on the ground, all of us, a way to hold more C-suite people accountable?
I think the accountability can, of course, be built into better governance structures. If you're in a listed company or so forth, if you go purely structural-wise, then I think that social media and the way we interact today has given a lot of power to everyone to interact and talk about leaders that are not behaving the way they should. So I think there's a lot of discussions I've had around that with people that are, quite worried about the influence a lot of people in their company have, because they can actually chat to each other on any social media platform so having those town hall meetings where you talk about, strategies and stuff, if that's not profoundly sensed in the organization or lived in the organization, they have, chat rooms otherwise and have a completely different debate, and you might not even know about it. Also gives, a very, very weak foundation to stand on. So I think there is those things that you can engage in as a leader today as well, and also honestly go in and say, I didn't know, but now I know, and now I want to take responsibility. So I think by interfering, so to say, or interacting is the right word, with people in the organization through different social medias and so forth as well, the governance that is getting sharper and sharper.
Eric had a question. Doesn't it all come down to changing the business person's orientation toward the triple bottom line rather than profit maximization?
The KUNO philosophy, we talk about long-term impact. You must be able to do good business long-term. That's an absolute must. And short-term gains is very often, just as it sounds, short-term gains. So I think the investment community now has actually, we have those discussions in all the boards I'm in, that the investment community now is putting much higher demands on sustainability being an integrated part of the business for them to invest. And that I've seen some figures lately, it's a tremendous growth lately. And I think that's a very good thing. I think when there is a demand and a pressure from the investment community that we want to see better long-term gains for the planet and for the people living on it, it helps to push it in the right direction as well.
Elsie wanted to know, what are some of the precipitating events that cause a client to reach out to you? Was it a breakdown or a breakthrough? How do they typically frame the problem when they reach out to you?
What we have in the beginning was very much through my network, and they actually know me or know of me, and I had personal calls discussing, whatever issue it was, and I traveled the world to talk to them. Now we have developed a few more things because we are scaling it because the demand has been very high. So we are framing it into, as I said, the book, and also adaptive learning platform with a program, with coaching, and with a global network where you can interact with KUNO. Again, the framing around that is very much about getting to know a sense of self in the business context you're in. Whether it's a crisis or whether it's, what should I do next, whether you want to be a leader or has been a leader, everything is framed around the leadership aspect when I talk to people. So the crisis might be in the company, but it always ends, back in the discussions around what kind of culture and what kind of leadership do you stand for.
You seem like a person who likes to find the best in people.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're starting with that. 40 years or 30 years of TM, has created a balance within yourself. So with KUNO, that's working with these leaders, trying to rebuild trust, can you take a cynical mentor or trainee and help them to be able to learn and teach trust? Because George Carlin said, behind every cynic is a disappointed idealist. So you've gone through a whole part where you actually believe the best. And some people, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you, don't deserve to my trust or my belief. And I see it every January, the middle of January. You can set your clock on. The World Economic Forum comes around, and all these nonsensical press releases are put out showing how great companies are doing. And most of them are not true. So if you are not, if you don't have 25 years of TM and meditation and trust of that, can you actually learn to be a mentor or trainee within your system and get through to organize? Or do you fundamentally have to believe the best in individuals?
I definitely think you can change, but the change needs to come again from within. And normally when I met a lot of people that have come from a very, how do you express it, very cynical approach. And 99.9 times of those cases, it's based on fear and disappointment in life, early life, and to protect themselves. So it's a shield of protection, and people that are so cynical and are so protected don't let people in, and that becomes very, very lonely. And most people I met don't like to be alone, completely alone. They want to have someone, at least something close to their hearts. And so helping them to see that capability of not being so afraid being able to maybe see what they could open up to and see it might not be as bad as they thought it would be, has actually done fundamental breakthrough for many people. It has actually helped them. And it's not done in a day again, as I said. It's profound change. Yeah.
But you're teaching farming to hunters. So all of the people that you're working with, particularly in the financial sector, are incentivized for short-term behavior. All of them, fund managers, etc. But you're trying to teach them long-term behavior, farming, which means it's either mission impossible or they have to give you, like you said, a lifelong partnership.
I think also, I'm on 3 listed boards, so we need to also deliver to the shareholders quarterly reports and so forth. And I think when you are having a long-term plan with short-term gains that are following the purpose on the long-term plan, you actually get closer to that. But I see many companies lose the ability to create a longer-term plan because they want to go short and fast on the short term. And then it's where it comes very one-dimensional. And that's when you lose the capability of being a farmer. But if you decided to grow something, to improve something more long term, and you know where to plant, when to put the water in the soil and so on, maybe one time you have a bad crop, maybe that's fine because you know long term it's going to work out, and then you know how to explain that to the shareholders as well. So it's a bit different way of you have to do both. You have to not, because there is people who are just dreaming about long-term visions and are not able to act upon it. And then you have short-term actions, right? And it's not profoundly seen long-term. You have to do both.
So I wanted to ask you, if companies and investors want change, if that is the case, why don't investors and companies don't stand next to each other and demand new rules of the game that will be generative in the right incentives, including paying fairly and enough to maintain our global commons? Because we know the solution, and on technologically, there's lots of solutions that can work, but we don't seem to be getting anywhere, or going real slow.
Yeah, I'm not saying it goes really fast, but as I said in the beginning of this, I think instead of being, looking at why others don't do anything, why don't we do something then? It sounds maybe naively, but I truly believe, it takes one person to do something. And again, that's why I decided to be part of this today. So I think that when people profoundly do something in their own work environment, that can actually change a little bit. It's not going to be a radical, fast movement and change. I don't believe that, but I think small steps with many people can change.
But how can we go faster than the music?
I think one way to faster is that not to polarize the question. I think many people are, to simplify, they want to polarize and they want to do it in their own community with their own people in their own country. And I think the more we can go through, because of technology as well, that we can talk to each other, me being in Copenhagen today and you in Amsterdam, and I don't know where everyone else is based or is listening.
Australia, the Netherlands.
Yeah, so just that is a very important thing to say. I think ideas, the similarities also is always surprising to most people how similar we are when it comes down to we actually talk to each other and try to do things, initiatives and so forth. So I think it goes faster if we decide to join forces from a more global perspective rather than just polarizing locally.
What can this audience do to help you specifically, apart from buying your book?
Yeah, no, it is a wonderful book, obviously, but I'm not writing a book to sell the book. I'm writing the book to share my stories and hope other people would like to share their stories to inspire other people. There is good leadership to be found. And even if you do make a mistake, and even if you do not deliver all the time, it's still okay because you tried. So I really hope that the people part of this would love to join KUNO for that reason, to make an impact and share their stories. And we, if they want our help to hold their hand to find their story, I'm happy to do so. But I don't think I can do this by writing a book. That would be stupid. But this is kind of to kickstart something, to get other people to share, because there is also profoundly wonderful leaders out there.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes the media doesn't like to cover that. They rather cover the other things because people obviously think that's sometimes more intriguing to read. Yes.
How do you respond to the Danone story? Here was the CEO who tried to be the leader that you're talking about, was kicked out by a couple of hedge funds because he wasn't hitting his financial targets. Maybe he didn't engage with the other shareholders well. But if I look at those two hedge funds on their homepage, clearly we are totally committed to sustainability. But this guy's not hitting his financial targets, so let's get rid of him. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it's super simplistic. It's wrong. It's definitely wrong, and you know, you can frame it whatever you want it to be framed in, but you know, action speaks louder than words. So if they've done that in that sense, as you say, there is a lot of things you can do as an investor, you know, whether we want to be part of that game or not. I do think the investment and the financial sector have a lot of responsibility in this as well. Putting the money where it should be put, not in the wrong places.
I agree with you on one side that beating up children only makes them serial killers. So, you know, attacking and doesn't help. But on the other side, I found that pain is a very effective tool in getting the attention of the business and financial community. If the pain that they're going through continues too much, that it's too painful, they will look for another direction. I don't find many companies out of the blue because, you know, things were going fine and they read a book, oh, we should have a different direction. There's usually something that happens that kind of got their attention.
Well, I don't know if that's a question or just a reflection from your side, because I'm just listening to the reflection. I think it's a good reflection, and I don't think it's the one thing that can solve things like, you know, the book or something. But I think that something that is very, very good and engaging is when you have profound dialogues with people, when you gather people from different perspectives and people with a lot of influence and power systematically, right? They sit on a lot of influence and power, and you gather them together and you create an environment where they want to open up. That's where profound things have actually happened and will happen.
Okay. I'm going to have to wrap up. We're coming down to the hour. I'd like to take a group selfie with everyone to prove that everybody was here, actually. You can share that with your kids. But they're probably a little bit older than I thought. So just wave to the camera, and the camera will take a photo of each person while we're going. And I want to thank you, Eva. This has been spectacular. And for those of you that want to reach out to Eva, she's very, very accessible. I was myself quite surprised how easily accessible. I want to thank our entire production crew for making this webinar possible. Sam, our producer, crypto genius, and ramen critic. Ricky, my absolute better half with no filter. Xi Jinping, our head of transparency and integrity. The Myanmar generals, our power sharing advisors. Vladimir Putin, head of conflict resolution. Jeff Bezos, our human resource and full tax compliance leader. Ted Cruz, our sedition expert and humility mentor. Marjorie Taylor Greene, our astronomer specializing on Jewish lasers, and Elon Musk, our humility coach. Thank you all very, very much for joining, and I hope to see you soon, and I'll send you all a link for the replay. Eva, thank you so much. It's been a joy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.